Welcome to The Explainer. Everything you think you know about domestic violence, throw it out. Today, we're diving into an unprecedented study out of Kenya that will completely shatter your assumptions. We aren't talking psychology today. No counseling. We are looking at this strictly through the lens of cold, hard economics. Picture this. You have a program handing out $700 to families living in extreme poverty. The main goal? Stop severe domestic abuse. So who do you give that cash to? The husband or the wife? Common sense absolutely screams that you never, ever hand cash to an abuser, right? Well, get ready to have that assumption turned completely upside down. 59%. Researchers actually gave the unconditional cash transfer directly to the husband. And severe physical violence, we're talking kicking, dragging, beating, plummeted by an unbelievable 59%. It was an absolute free fall. To wrap our heads around why this happened, we have to entirely shift our perspective. Okay, let's really dive into this. To understand this study, we have to strip away the moral lens for just a second. We have to view physical abuse not as some random, uncontrollable loss of temper, but as a brutal economic equation. The data shows violence, in this context, is a highly calculated behavior, driven purely by financial motives. Researchers broke this down into two distinct categories. First up is instrumental violence. Now, this completely flips the script. Instrumental violence is not a loss of control. It's a calculated financial extraction tool. The husband is literally using physical violence as a lever to extract money and resources from his wife. It's a terrifyingly practical strategy for a completely broke partner. On the flip side, we have expressive violence. And this is an entirely different beast. This isn't about money at all. Expressive violence is committed purely for dark, emotional gratification. It's about dominance, sadistic pleasure. There is zero financial return here. It yields only a high emotional return for the abuser. And that brilliantly illustrates our first major breakthrough. When the wife gets the cash, severe physical violence drops by a massive 51%. Incredible, right? But wait, when the husband gets the money, severe physical violence drops by 59%. It actually worked slightly better. So why on earth is that? It all comes down to the math. Husbands are using physical violence instrumentally to extract resources, sure, but they actually find it distasteful. It takes effort. It carries a heavy social stigma. Basically, it's a business cost. The very second a cash transfer magically meets their financial needs, that business cost becomes unnecessary. So they just stop. But hold on a second. Here is where the data takes a very, very dark turn. Okay, so we just solved physical violence by paying off the husband. But what happens to sexual violence in that exact same scenario? This question right here exposes the terrifying difference between the actual motives behind the abuse. Look at this stark contrast. When the wife receives the cash, both physical and sexual violence drops significantly. But when the husband receives the cash, only physical violence drops. Sexual violence doesn't budge an inch. This proves that sexual violence is purely expressive. It's about dominance, not financial stress. So paying the husband off does absolutely nothing to stop it. The numbers couldn't be clearer. Only by putting the cash directly into the hands of the wife do we see sexual violence dramatically collapse. Specifically, rape drops by a staggering 56%. You simply cannot pay the husband to stop expressive violence. You can only empower the wife with the resources to reject it. Let's break down exactly how this builds into an economic solution. Step 1, the wife receives the cash. Step 2, her financial exit threshold instantly shoots up. She's no longer trapped by sheer poverty. Step 3, the husband realizes the cost of committing any violence is now way too high. The risk of losing her and her brand new income is suddenly very real. So the crucial takeaway here is that we are fighting the exact same war, but on two completely different economic fronts. Cash transfers to the wife work because they destroy her tolerance for the abuse. Transfers to the husband work because they destroy his need to use abuse as a financial tool. Now, we've seen the economic math going on inside the house, and it's fascinating. But researchers found something genuinely miraculous happening right next door. What do you think happens to the people in the village who didn't receive a single dime? 0.16. That is the standard deviation drop in physical violence for women in the spillover group, meaning these women received absolutely nothing. Their husbands received absolutely nothing. but simply because they lived in the exact same village as the cash recipients, the beatings in their own homes dropped significantly too. How is that even possible? Well, it's the neighbor spillover effect. When a few households get cash, the baseline level of violence in the entire community drops. And when violence becomes less common, the social cost and the public stigma of being an abuser suddenly skyrockets. The local norms shift. Female empowerment essentially becomes a quiet, neighborhood-wide contagion. This right here is a massive breakthrough. We have previous studies, like Oportunidades in Mexico or experiments in Bangladesh, but this Kenyan experiment proves something completely new for the first time. It directly compares treating the husband's wallet versus treating the wife's wallet. Treating the husband mathematically stops physical extraction, but treating the wife is a vastly superior shield against all forms of abuse. But before we start celebrating the economics, we have to confront a massive, glaring limitation. Using unconditional cash to solve a deep moral crisis comes with a tragic flaw. Yes, the money absolutely changed their behavior. The violence stopped. But it did not change their beliefs. Just look at this. The reality is staggering. In the baseline survey, 48% of the men fundamentally believed they had the right to beat their wives. And after the cash transfers, after the violence actually dropped, that number did not change at all. Half the men still firmly believe they have the right to hit their spouse. The toxic social norms survived the entire experiment completely intact. The money didn't magically turn these abusers into better people. It didn't suddenly rewire their morality. It simply made the act of violence economically unnecessary for the time being. We didn't actually cure the disease of domestic violence. We just temporarily priced the abusers out of the market. Which leaves us with one final, incredibly uncomfortable question to take away. If reducing physical domestic violence can be achieved by simply paying off the abuser's financial stress, are we actually fixing society's deep-rooted issues? Or are we just paying an economic ransom to buy a temporary peace? The data demands we look right at it. Thanks so much for tuning in to this explainer.